Currently this is the form. We have three fields. First one is username, second one is email, and third one is password. And the submit button is currently disabled. If I try to write any username, if the username is less than 3 letters, it will throw us an error. If the condition satisfies, the error will be gone. Then comes the email. I'll write an email. Until and unless the email is a valid email, it will throw an error. And in case of password, I will just simply write something. Here in the password, we have three validations. If the password is less than 6 characters, it will throw us an error. So make it 6 characters. Now it is saying that password must contain at least one capital letter. So I will type a capital letter, and then it is saying that password must contain at least a number. Then I will type a number. As soon as I complete all the validations, you can see the submit button is enabled. Now if I just play along and delete a character from the username, you can see the error state is showing up and the submit button is now disabled again. You might be thinking that this is done manually or with a lot of hard work, but it is actually done quite simply. I just have a simple object like validation rules. In the username, I have a validate function that the value of the username should be 3 or more characters long, else simply throw this message. In the email, I have this regex. It should match the email format, else throw this message. In the password, I have three validations. The password should be 6 or more characters long. If that is not the case, throw this error. If the password does not contain any capital letters, throw this error. And if does not contain any number, throw this error. In the code, you will be able to see we are using this use form validation hook, and we are destructuring the values, the errors, the is valid and the handle change function from this. And in the hook, we are passing this validation rules and an initial state, which is username, email and password. So now let us get started. First, I will create a route inside the pages directory. I will name this form validation.js, and simply create a function. I will name that const form component, and this will be an arrow function. Here I will create the structure of my form, which will be having three fields for now. You can create as many as you want. So I'll name it like const initial form state, and first one will be your username, which will be blank for now. The email, this will be blank as well, and the same as with password. You can create as many fields as you want. Now we will be doing some other configuration, but before that we have to return something, and we will create the form right now. For each field, I will create a span. I'll wrap the input field inside label. I won't be using the HTML4 attribute, but rather I would just type out the username and then use the input. Input type will be text. The name will be username, and let's add some class name, as well. Let's just split the screen so that we can easily visible, but before that we will have to fire up the terminal and type npm run dev. So we have opened this up and we forgot to export that, obviously. So in the end we will do export default, the name of the component, which is form component, and now it will be visible for now. And let's split the screen, and I will collapse this one. We will be adding some class names to the label as well. It will be of type flex, and we will add some border so that we can see. Okay, let's add border 2 and padding of 2. Okay, fine. And in the input field we will have to add focus outline none, so that this thing vanishes. So when we focus, this will vanish. And now we will obviously have to add some padding left 2. Okay, enough for now. And we will copy this span 3 times and change this here to email, and the name of this field will be email, and similarly this will be our password section, and the name of the input will be password. Right, so let's add some more design. Class name, display flex, gap will be of 2. We will have to have flex column, and at the end of the fields we will be adding a button. This will be button, and type would be submit, and the value of this will be submit. And as we are adding type submit, we will have to add the on submit function on the form. So we will add on submit here, and we will be creating a function like const handle submit, and this will be another arrow function, and currently we will be doing alert form submitted. Yeah, and let's pass this function on submit. So let's try this. When we click on submit, it will say form submitted. We currently don't have any kind of functionalities or validations at all, so we will be diving into that. First, we'll be creating some validation rules. So for that, we don't require the UI. So I'll just maximize this screen and let's zoom in. And here we will be creating the validation rules. So this will be an object like const validation rules. Let's keep it camel case. So I will keep the R capital. And first key will be username. So each section of the validation rules can have multiple rules. For that, we are using array. Even if it has a single rule, we will be using the array, and in the array we will be creating a validator, which will be a function. This is an arrow function, and inside that we have a parameter called value, and this will be returning a boolean. Like we will be checking value.length is more than is equal to 3. So this will be the comparison. If value.length is more or equal to 3, then this function will return us true. And then there will be a message for this function. Username must be at least 3 characters long. So if this validator function is false, then this message should be shown. So this is for username. So similarly, we will be creating for email as well. There we go for the email. This will be an array. Inside that we will be having a single validator function for now, validator, and again the value parameter, and here we will be adding a regex. So this is a simple basic regex that tells us that this will be the username field, plus there will be an @ and a domain name, then there will be a dot and the top level domain or the TLD. So on this regex we will be testing the value. So we will add test.value, and if this is wrong, then we will be showing this message, enter a valid email address. And for the password field, we will be having 3 validator function. Now you will be seeing that why we use this array field. Let's collab this one. In the first object, there will be a validator function and value. If the value dot length, if not more than is equal to 6, then show us this error message. Password must be at least 6 characters. Okay, this is the first validation error, and similarly we will be having others. Validator value, and here I will be adding a simple regex that A to Z, capital A to capital Z / test value. So what this says, the value should have at least 1 capital letters from A to Z. If that is not the case, then show us this error message, which should be password must contain a capital letter. And similarly, there will be another case like validator function, value. Similarly, we will be checking for numbers from 0 to 9. There should be something, and on that we will be testing our value. And if that is not the case, then show this message, password must contain a number. So finally, we are done with all our validation rules. So let's create our custom hook. So I'll go to our root, I'll collapse everything, and in the root I'll be creating a directory called hooks, and inside that I will create use form validation.js. This will be a simple function, const use form validation, and this will be taking two arguments. First one is this initial form state, which will be having the username, password and email, and second one is the validation rules, which is the validation for username, validation for email, validation for password. You can have as many fields as you want, but you also have to add their validation rules as well. So I'll just simply copy the name initial form state, comma validation rules. In the array function, I will be creating some local states like const values and set values, use state, import the use state. Then using the use state, the values will be set via this initial form state. So whatever will be in the initial form state will be defaultly set to these values. So we can use these values and set these values accordingly. And we will be having other states as well, like errors, set errors, and initially it will be a blank object, and simply there will be something like is valid, which will define if the form is valid and we would be able to submit or not. So name this set is valid, and initially this will be false, which tells that initially any user won't be able to submit the form. Now there will be a handle change function. So let's name a function handle change, and this will be having an event. We will be destructuring the name and value from the event dot target. Let's suppose we are using this handle change function inside this input field. So I will just type this on change handle change. I haven't imported that, but never mind. So let me explain. If the handle change function is being called here, so the event.target will be this input element, and we will be simply extracting the name from here. So in the name, this username variable will be there, and there should be another value like example value. So this thing will be destructured in this value. So we will be making this value dynamic, but never mind. For now, I'll just keep it blank. So we will just do set values, which is this function. Inside this, we will take all the previous values like prev values, and we will return something like spread operators, prev values, and accordingly we will update. If we have called this handle change function from this username component, then in the values we will be keeping this username in the key, and the value will be this value that we have destructured here. So accordingly in this field, the username key will be updated with the value. So this will be set in the values using this values function. So after that, so we will be passing everything to our main component, return values, then errors, then is valid, then this handle change function. Then in our main component, let's destructure the everything that we have just returned, like values, errors, is valid, and handle change. From what? From the use form validation. And let's import this as well. So I will import this in the top. Import use from validation from /hooks / use form validation. And in the use form validation, we were receiving this initial form state and validation rules. So we'll just pass them inside there. And we will obviously have to export this as well. As default, export default use form validation. Let's now play with the validation. For that, I will add a use effect hook, like use effect, and import that from React. And we will be running this use effect whenever the values are updated. So I will add the values to the dependency arrays. This is the values. Inside that, I will create a function named const validate form. This will be an array function, and I will call this immediately after here. And inside the validate form, I will create a simple blank object of new errors. This will be a blank object, and let's create a temporary is valid variable. Let form is valid is equal to this one. This is valid. Initially, this is valid is false, so the form is valid will be false as well. So now we will add a for loop for const key in the validation rules. We will be iterating over the validation rules, and inside the main functionality will be lying. Let's grab a single rule like const rules is equal to validation rules of key. So it means that we are grabbing a single key from this whole thing, like for example username, and then we were grabbing the rules from validation rules, and here will be username. This is the username. So we are eventually getting this array. We are eventually getting this array as rules. So I'll just do undo, and this rules will be having an array of rules. And for the case of username, the array is having a single element, but for the case of password, we are having 3 elements. So we will obviously have to iterate over all the rules. For that, we will be using another for loop for const rule of rules. We will create a variable name is valid rule rule.validator, which is this function inside this rule. So this is a simple rule. Inside that we have validator function and values.key. This means we have the values here, which is a simple object, and we are passing username here. So this username will be passed as a value in the validator function like this, and then it will just simply return us a boolean like username.length more than 6. In our case, this is password, so this will be checking that if the password.length is more than 6 or not. This will be simply returning a boolean to us, and which will be saved to this is valid rule section. Now we will be checking if the is valid rule is true or false. If this is not a valid rule, means the rule is not maintained properly. The variable name is valid rule. If the rule is not maintained properly, then we will have to show the errors. For that, we will be using this new errors object that we created a few moments ago. And in the new errors, we will be adding the property to the new errors that did not follow our rule. So for our case, it might be the username or the password or the email. So new errors dot the property will be rule dot message, like this one. If this does not follow to our rules, this message will be added to the error message. And as soon as we get an error message, the form should not be valid. So form is valid should be set to false, which is this one. And then break from this inner loop. This loop will be broken. And obviously we will be having some errors, and we will set them to set errors as new errors. So whatever errors we are having, we will be setting this to this error using this set errors function. And the validity of the form would be set in the same manner. Set is valid, whatever the function name is, set is valid. In the top, we will just set it form is valid. So now there would be another condition where this form is valid has to be true. Like in some case, the form has to be valid, right? So for that, we will be checking if object dot keys in the errors, like if in the errors we do not have any key at all, means the errors is blank, then the form has to be valid. So we will be checking length of the errors object is 0, means there is no error at all. And if the form is valid is already false, only in that case make the form is valid is equal to true. Here let me repeat again. If we do not have any error, then in that case the error object will be 0 length. And apart from that, if the form valid was previously false, in that case make the form is valid true. So currently we are all set with this. So we will have to handle the errors as well in the front end. We are receiving these errors and we have not set any values at all in the front end. So let's get into that. Here we will be adding values dot username. So what it does, in the values we have these values that we are discharging from here, and dot username means this dot username which we are getting in these values. We are first passing the initial form state to this use form validation hook, then we are using this initial form state in the values, then we are returning these values to this form component again and using them in the values, like values dot username. Similarly, we will have to do this again with the values. Let me remind that this will be value, not values. The attribute name will be value, not values, but this will be values dot email. And similarly for the password, this will be values dot password. And we will have to add the onChange function as well here. OnChange function here as well. And there should be a state to show these errors. So I'll simply add this, like if there are any errors related to the email field, then simply show us a paragraph which will be errors.email. Sorry. So I'll copy this format for everyone here and here. Okay, so this one is already email. I will have to change the first one, like errors.username, and the last one errors.password. Okay, the spelling is wrong, password. Okay, now let's see in the front end. Initially they're showing all the error fields, so we will have to handle that as well. So when I type a username like 3 words or more, the error field just goes away. Same happens with the email test@admin.com. The error field vanishes when I just complete the validation, and same must happen with the password. You can see the error field changes. Then I add a number, then it says password must contain a capital letter, so I can add a capital letter and the error field just vanishes. So now we have to handle the error fields that is showing initially. When we refresh the page, you can see the username must be at least 3 character long and all the error fields are showing initially. In order to handle that, we will have to dive into the use form validation.js. Let's create a state like touched, set touched, set touched, this will be a blank object initially, and inside that we will be tracking that if we have touched a field or not. So for that, come inside this first for loop, let's create a variable is field touched, sorry for the spelling, and touched dot key. So what it does, it checks in the touched object that if the field is already touched or not. While iterating, it is checking that if the field is touched or not. If it is already touched by the user, then only show the error, or else just continue for the next iteration. For that, we will be adding, if the field is not yet touched, then just skip and go to the next iteration. And to update this touched, we will be changing in the handle change function. So whenever someone changes anything in the input field, we will do set touched. Similarly, we will be creating an arrow function inside this, previous values. Whatever the previous values were, keep them untouched and take out their name and set them to true. Setting them to true means that this field, this specific field, was at least once touched by the user. So now we can show them the error. Now come to the front end and you can see all the errors are gone now. I will refresh this, and if we type 2 characters, this will show us that username must have 3 characters or long. Now if I type 3 characters, the error will be gone. Now for the email, if I type something invalid, the error will show up. But if I refresh, this error message will be gone. Now one thing is left. We will have to disable the submit button until all the fields are properly filled. So for that, we have already created this is valid. So we have destructured it as well, is valid. So the button has a property named disabled. If is valid is true, means that the user will be able to submit. So disabled should be false then. So this will be not is valid. Let me see. Let me refresh again. Currently the is valid is not properly working. So let me see. Let me dive into this. Probably the is valid is not being updated. So for that, we will see what is the error. We will have to probably add the touched. We will have to run this use effect. When any element is touched, we will pass this inside this dependency array, and we will check for object.keys inside this touched if length is equal to 3 and set and. So this means that if all the input fields are once at least touched and there is no length and the form was previously not valid, only then make the form valid true. Now let's check our output. So initially the submit is disabled. We can't actually see the styling. For that, I will add some Tailwind CSS classes so that you can easily visualize that if the button is disabled or not. For that, I will go here and add some class names. Class name bg background green 600. Let me split the screen again and collapse this one. Background will be green, text white, px4 py2, and this is the current state. And in the Tailwind, we have something special called disabled. So this checks if a button is disabled or not. If the button is disabled, then make the background color bg green 200 and Again, if the button is disabled, then make the cursor to be not allowed. So now you can easily see that the button is disabled now. When I type something in the username, in the email field, and in the password section, the button should have been enabled. I probably have missed something in the dependency array. Yes, probably the validation rules should have been there. So when I update the validation rules in the dependency array, and let me try this again from the initial. You can now see the submit button is allowed. Now if I just change anything from the username, like this will be 2 characters, the username error should be shown and the submit button will be disabled. Now also we have gone so far, so let's style this error field as well. So for that I will come to this form validation, and in the piece section let's select all of them together and add class name, text to be read 600 and text would be extra small. And now you can see when I type Sam completely, the error message should be gone. But if I clear this email field, this will show this error message in the small red character. For more such videos, follow the playlist link given in the description, and the source code can be found on GitHub. The link will be in the description as well.